Daf Samach Aleph Amud Aleph will begin Daf Samach Amud Beis, the end of the first wide line. We learned previously that at Korban Pesach, if it's shechted on Yudalet Benisan, Sheloi Lishma, for a different Korban, then it's possible. But Shayim Shana, the rest of the year, Pesach is a Shlomim. So it's the opposite. If he shechts it for a Shlomim, if he shechts it Sheloi Lishma, it's kosher. So now we have the following shayli: Boilahu Pesach sheshachta b'shayim shana b'shinu ba'alim mahu. What if he shechted for a different owner? Now, just like there's a shinoi of the kodesh that apostles the animal, that apostles the korban, if a person shechted the korban Pesach on Yudalet for a different korban, there's a shinoi of the kodesh that apostles. Shinu Ba'alim also apostles. If he shechted it for a different person, a person other than the one that's supposed to eat the korban, he shechts it for someone other than the one who's supposed to receive the kapora, it also apostles. So will we say the same thing? Just like a korban Pesach b'shayim shana, if he shechts it sheloi lishma, meaning for a change, for a different korban, for a shlomim, then it's kosher. Perhaps we'll say that if he shechts it for a different owner, for a different ba'alim, then it's also considered a shinui, and it takes it out of the designation of a Pesach, and it should also be kosher. So that's the shayla. Now, shinu ba'alim k'shinu kodesh domi. Do we say we equate the two? Umach shalei or loy? Do we say and therefore it's kosher or no? He said it in front of Rav, and he said as follows: Hoil v'shinu kodesh poisla bizman. V'shinu v'kodesh pasels bizman on Yud Dalet Benisan. If he shechted for a different korban, it pasels. V'shinu ba'alim poisla bizman. And similarly, for a different ba'alim, it also pasels it on Yud Dalet Benisan. So I should equate the two. Ma shinu kodesh, just like shinu kodesh poisla bizmanoi, it passes it bizmanoi, but machshir la'achar zmanoi, but la'achar zmanoi, if it's for a different kodesh shaloi lishma, it's kosher. Shinu ba'alim shepoisla bizmano machshir la'achar zmano. So we should say the same thing with the shinu of a ba'alim, that it passes it on Yudalet Nisan, and afterwards shaloi bizmana, it should also be kosher. It should also be an akira, it should be kosher. The Achrayim asked the question, we understand that when you say a shini kodesh that it's kosher, it was oikered from a Pesach, and he's shechting for a shlomim, so it's kosher. He took it away from the Pesach designation, now it's a shlomim, it's kosher for a shlomim, so then it's kosher, we understand. But a shini ba'alim, what does it have to do with the Pesach designation? What does that have to do with being oiker the Pesach designation from it just because he shechts it for a different person? The way Rav Chana explains it is as follows: that the reason why we say that Shaloi Lishma b'Shayim Shana it's kosher, it's not because he redesignated it to a shlomim. It's not because he made it into a shlomim. It's because his machshava of Shaloi Lishma takes it away from a Pesach. It's no longer a Pesach because it's Shaloi Lishma. And Memela, it blives a Shlomim because Pesach b'Shayim Shana is a Shlomim. So similarly, we should say perhaps that a Shinu of the Ba'alim, now he didn't redesignate it to a Shlomim, but since he's shechting it for a different Ba'alim, which is something which is pasels the Korban Pesach, then it now takes it out of the designation of a Pesach. And Memela, it blives a shlomim because Pesach b'Shayim Shana is a shlomim. So that's the shayla. V'omerlin, he said, you can't compare a shini kodesh to shini ba'alim. Lo im amra b'shini kodesh. If you say by shini kodesh that that's the case, it came psul b'gufa. It's a psul in the korban itself. V'yeshna b'arba avodos, and this psul applies in all of the avodos, not just by shlit. It applies also by the Kabbalah, Halach, and the Zrika. Mashen kain, that by the shinu ba'alim, it doesn't apply to the other cases. It's only that we say by the case of Zrika, except for the Korban Pesach, which we'll see shortly, But otherwise, it only applies the Shinu Balam to Zrika, because Zrika is where he gets the kapara. So that's a critical avodah where we say if it's for a different Balam, it's a Shinui in the one who's supposed to get kapara, and therefore it passes. So how can you compare it to Shina Kaidish? Shina Kaidish is Begufa. It's something in the Korban itself. And it applies to all the avodas. V'yesh la'achar misa, and it applies even after the misa. Even after a person, the Baalim died, and it's Yerush Yarshans, the Korban. And then if it's shechted for a different Korban, if one of the avodas are done, Shaloi Lishmo, it still passes it. V'yesh l'betzibur k'v'yochid. And it applies whether it's a Korban Yochid or a Korban Tzibur. If it's Shaloi Lishmo, it'll pass the Korban. Toimer b'shinu ba'alim. Can you say that by shinu ba'alim, where the aim psul b'gufa? The shinu ba'alim is not a psul in the guf. It's not in the korban itself. It's in the ba'alim of the korban, but it's not in the korban itself. Ve'ena ba'arba avodas, and it's not in the dalet avodas. It applies to zrika. Ve'ena la'achar misa, and it doesn't apply la'achar misa. La'achar misa. Then if the person, the Yarsha, when he was shechted for a person other than the Baalim, if it's after the death of the Baalim, the Baalim are not here in any event. They're not here, the Baalim. So Ashinu of Baalim is not relevant. And it doesn't apply because it doesn't apply by a tzibur because everyone is a Baalim. There's no Shini Baalim by Korban Tzibur because you can't shecht it for a different Baalim. They're all Baalim. So if you say it's not for Reuven, it's for Shimon, but Shimon is also Baalim. And if you say it's for someone who is for a Nochri, that's not going to be considered a Shinu Baalim. Shinu Baalim is only somebody who's eligible to have the kapara. So it doesn't apply by Korban Tzibur. Now, even though two of these four are lav davka, you can be doiche these kashas, these shinuyim. Atate mea davkanino, but two of them are davka. But two of them are accurate, so that's enough to say that you cannot compare the two together. They cannot be compared. So why are we saying that two of the points are lav davka? Because what are you saying? That shinu balam is not a psul begufa, it's not a psul in the guf of the korban itself. It's external. It's the machshava of the person, of the balam. The psula machshava ba'almahu, it's a psul in his machshava and what his intention is, but it's not a psul in the gufa korban. Shina kaidish nami, psul machshava ba'almahu. If there's a shina for kaidish for it to change the korban, it's also a psula machshava. So therefore, that's not a chilek. V'su, da'amr shinu ba'alam eino la'achar misa. That's what you said, that shinu ba'alam is not after achar misa, not after his death. It's not necessarily so. Because of Rav Pinchas Brei the Rav Ami, the Amr Yeshinu Balam Achar Misa Meikol Meimar, but he says that there is a Shinu Balam Achar Misa. He says that if the Balam died and the Yerush inherited it, and then if the Avodah was done for someone else other than the Yerush, other than the heir, that is considered Shinu Balam. So Meikol Meimar. So therefore, you don't have that chiluk. But Tata Miyas Davka Nina, but at least two of the points are Davka. Two of the points are accurate. Now, a point has to be addressed. We're saying one of the Chilukim are that we say that the Shinu Kodesh, that applies to all the Avodas. Then it applies to all of the Avodas. But Shinu Baalim is Eino Barba Avodas. The Shinu Baalim is not by the four Avodas. Now, even though that's so by other Korbanos, but by the Korban Pesach, it's not that way. By the Korban Pesach, since eating Achila is an integral part of the kapara of the Korban, of the mitzvah of the Korban, it's to be eaten. Therefore, it applies not only by Zrika, it applies by shlit as well. And according to Rishonim, Mother Rishonim, applies by all Avodas. So, therefore, l'chera, why would that be a chilek? By Korban Pesach, and our discussion is on the Korban Pesach, it does apply to all avodas. But nevertheless, since it doesn't apply to all the avodas by other korbanos, we see that there is a weakness in this shinui of shinu balam. It's not as strong as a shinu kodesh, because by all other korbanos except the Korban Pesach, it's not by the Dalet Avodas. So you see that it doesn't have that same effect. It doesn't have that same force. So what is the maskona? Elama Rava, he says Pesach sheshachtem shayimais hashana b'shinu balam. He says it's a Pesach v'yeshachtem b'shinu balam the rest of the year. Nasa k'mish eloi balam b'zmana. It's like a Pesach that if b'zmana it's on Yudalit. It's like if shechted on Yudalit for a different owner, then the korban is possible. We say it's a korban possible. It's a Pesach which is possible, so it's considered a korban Pesach shaloi l'shem balim, and it's possible. We don't treat it like a different korban. You're not oiker the shem Pesach mineh, and here also you're not oiker the shem of the korban Pesach from it, and therefore it's not a shlomim, and therefore it's possible. Zok the Mishnah, if a person shach the Korban Pesach for people who are unable to eat the Korban Pesach, somebody is sick, or he's a Zok, they can't even eat a kazayis of the Korban Pesach, or people who are not part of this chabura, they're not registered in this chabura, or la'arelim for people who were not gemald, v'litzmeim, or people who are tomei. Now all of these people, they can't either physically or halachically cannot eat the Korban Pesach. So it's for people who can't eat it, possible. The Korban Pesach is possible. But la'oichlav is shaloi la'oichlav. It's for both who can and can't eat it. L'menuyav, with shaloi l'menuyav, people who are part of the chabur, and for those who aren't, l'mulim v'la'arelim v'latmeim v'latairim kosher. As long as some of the people are part of the chabur, registered in the chabur, and are able to eat from the bolsa of the Korban Pesach, then it's kosher. Shachta kain v'chatzos v'shachta before chatzai is possible. Then it's possible. Mishum shenemar bein harabayim. It says in the afternoon, so the Korban Pesach has to be bein harabayim. Shachta kain l'tamid v'shachta before the tamid of the bein harabayim. Now it's kosher. Now, even though we learned previously that it's yucher davar. It should come after the Talmud Shel Bein Harabayim, but nevertheless, if you shechted it beforehand, it's kosher. But what you do is have somebody stir the blood so it doesn't coagulate, and wait until they did the Zrikas Adam of the Talmud Shel Bein Harabayim, and then do the Zrika of the Korban Pesach. But if the blood of the Korban Pesach the Zrika was done before the Talmud Shel Bein Harabayim, V'im Nizrak kosher. Zok the Gemara Ton Rabbanon, Ketzat Shaloi La'oichlav. What is the case when he shachs it for people who can't eat it? L'shem choila or l'shem zaken, someone who's sick or old. So he physically can't eat the meat. Ketzat Shaloi L'menuyav. So what is loy menuv? Nimno alav chabura zu shat l'shem chabura acheres. People joined in one chabura, and he shachted it for people in a different group, not for the people who joined in this group to eat from this set. Menane mile. Where do I know this from? The Tana Rabban we learned b'michsas. The Torah says b'michsas nefashis. It says in pasuk. It says that b'michsas nefashis ishel fi achloi tachoiso alaseh. So b'michsas is according to the number of people. Melamed she'ena pesach nishchet ela menuya. You only shechted it according to the people that are part of the chabur. Yachol shachta shaloi lemenuyav. Yeah, kaiver mitzvah kosher. You might think, okay, that's the mitzvah, but it doesn't passel the korban. You might think if he did shaloi lemenuyav, he was over, but the korban is still kosher. Talmud loimer. It says b'michsas tachaisim. It says b'michsas. It says michsas nefashos ish lefiachot tachaisu alaseh. So each according to what they eat, you should count. So it says it repeats it. It repeats the counting. It repeats the inyan of counting twice. So therefore we apply the rule. So therefore we say that kosev shana alav la'akiv. The rule is that by Kochim, if the Torah repeats it, it means to say that it's not only a violation of a mitzvah, it's not only a violation of an essay, but it's makiv, it passes the korban if it's not done. So here also, it's a repetition, and therefore it passes it. Rebbe says, Loshan Sursiu. This tachleisu, it can be interpreted in a different way. It can be interpreted, like we find the Loshan Sursi, a Lashon of Aramaic, that it's in Syria, Lashon Sursi, Syria, Ka'adam Shemel Chavera Kaislit Lezel, like a person says, Shech Eseh for me. So the Lashon of Tachaisu, that can also be a Lashon of Shchita. And therefore, then, how do we know that the critical time is that it should be for people who can eat it, and people are in Menuyav? At the time of Shchita. Tachaisu, at the time of Shchita, it should be for Leminuyav and for the Oichlav. Ashkan Shaloi Leminuyav, we find that Shaloi Leminuyav, Shaloi La'oichlav Menolan, how do we know that it's for people who can't eat it? Where do we know that the same halacha applies for the people who can't eat it? So we know that we learn out that the Shaloi Leminuyav is possible. But how do we know? It says ish lefi achloi tachaisim. You count lefi achloi. So iskish eichlom lemnuyav, and we make a hekish. So therefore, just like we say shalom lemnuyav, if it's not done, it's possible. So too shaloi la'ichlav, if it's shechted shaloi la'ichlav, also the korban is possible.